The Leviathan Gauntlet is fundamentally broken in several ways and will fail if it isn't changed soon. The Leviathan Gauntlet is kind of like going to school and whipping out your Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but the kid you are playing against has a deck with only the 5 pieces of Exodia in it. I don't know how he managed that, but he did. Would you verse them again the next day? Would you verse them again the day after? Probably not. Unless you had a whole deck of Exodia cards too. It could be funny maybe once. It won't be funny the second and third times. Although I think the Leviathan Gauntlet is integral to the entire Illuvium ecosystem, I'm going to tell you why it cannot exist how it currently is, and it has to change. On top of this, I will propose 3 potential solutions as to how I think it needs to change, which could make it successful in the future. And there are definitely other options as well. But most importantly, I want to get that conversation started. But for this entire topic, context is very important. So the Leviathan's initial plan in Illuvium was quite simple. You get these Illuvials, they have random stats, and you can go into a special battle format where you wage against an opponent. This was also designed initially around a 1v1 format, which is quite different to what we have right now with the free-for-all 8-player game mode. But with that system, you could go, hey, I want to wager up 0.1 Ethereum, you wager up 0.1 Ethereum or $100 or whatever you want to do, whoever wins takes the pot, which is really, really fun and exciting, especially when you know the opponent you're playing against, you know what Illuvials they have, you're all built up, let's say, and a team of 10 Illuvials that you've got really powerful and really strong. It's so much more achievable than what we actually have right now. Everything has changed so much and Leviathan has stayed the same, and it doesn't match the current systems that Illuvium is currently built around. So let's take a look at an Illuvial so I can better explain my point. Here we have a Scoriox on the Illuvidex. Its stats aren't too great, but for the sake of this, we're going to pretend it has maximum stats. For a level 60 max stat Scoriox, okay, so if it had a 5 in attack speed, a 5 in attack damage, and it was level 60. We can see looking at the base stats here and how the modifiers all work. We could see in the corner here, you can see base attack damage is 210, base attack speed in this case is 85. We can actually figure out exactly what the damage per second this Scoriox would do at max stats and level 60. And it would be 562.275 damage per second, not including resistance or grit and resolve calcs or anything like that, or a mega power, because when it casts, it actually gets an increase to its damage, attack speed, and so on. Anyways, if you had a level 40 Scoriox with a 0 in the attack damage and attack speed category, it would be 249.9 damage per second. Now, a bad stat Scoriox is about 40% as powerful or 60% weaker, not including a mega power and resistances. Including all of those things, a bad stat Scoriox would be maybe 80% weaker than its God mode Scoriox counterpart. Now, this might not seem too crazy because a mid-tier stat Scoriox, something with like 3s across the board, is probably maybe 50 or maybe 40% weaker than the really top tier Scoriox of stats. And in the Gauntlet, it's not even that easy to get a Scoriox on your board. It's a lot more achievable now than it was 2 weeks ago, but it's not super duper easy, and you're not going to get it for every single stage 3 Illuvial. So you don't need to buy every single one of them. But let's also take a look at the cost of several Illuvials that I feel are quite integral in the current meta for the Illuvium Gauntlet. Obviously, the meta will shift, but there will always be some similar array of Illuvials that you do need to acquire to be competitive in the Leviathan Gauntlet game. So first up, we have this Gorilla right here, which costs about $15. Then we also have Revo, which is about $50. Gyro is much harder to acquire, so Revo is a lot more important here. You can get that Exalted Gorilla though, and that's probably a lot more expensive. We've got a TNT, which costs about $5. Very surprising, a very big component to the game right now. Sea Forest is probably a little bit more relevant though. After that, we have Octius at a whopping price of $215, obviously because it is a tier 5 Illuvial. And then last but not least, we have Sin Elf. Only 2 of these are for sale. And this one, I searched with like, if you have 20% attack speed or above 20% attack damage and stuff, and still I only found 2 on the marketplace. I used Illuvi Pro for this. The subscription is quite cheap. You can go and check it out if you want to hunt on the marketplace for cheap stat Illuvials. I used that to do some of the research for this video. But this Sin Elf is $1,600. And that isn't the only one. Things like Ramfight are probably quite expensive. You've got things like Goliant. You've got Singe. There are so many integral tier 4 and tier 5 Illuvials that you simply cannot win the game without. So for these 5 specifically, you're looking about $1,850. Obviously, the Sin Elf really takes it out of perspective. It's really quite an outlier. It's so important that I kind of need to include it, but it is an outlier. So let's say an average of $400 for 5 really important Illuvials. Now, when you need at least 50 to 60 Illuvials to have enough flexibility to win the game, you really just can't go, I've got a forest, I want to go straight for forest, I'm going to win. No, if you get crushed in the first 10, 15 rounds, you're not going to have your chance to get to your forest, and it's not going to matter. So you're going to need about 50 to 60 Illuvials at least in any given meta to be able to win in the Illuvium Leviathan. The average competitive deck with this in mind is ranging from like 3,000 USD to like 10,000 USD for a top tier team. This is too expensive for anyone who wants to play the game and really get involved. Now, it's not necessarily targeted towards them, but here's why it's still an issue. With all of this in mind, the player pool will be so freaking small, it's not even funny. The player experience will be really dull because of that. Imagine playing against the same, like my analogy at the start of the video, imagine playing against the same person every single time you play, and you can only play during one time zone because that's only when that person is available. It's a crap user experience. It's really, really bad. Now, the other thing is you might be like, oh, I'm going to invest 5K because the rewards are going to help pay me back over time. Now, the rewards can't continue if they serve the same people every week. If you've got the same 10 people in the leaderboard and the team sees that there really isn't that much demand for this and it's not generating that much revenue because it's so hard to get into, then the rewards are going to stop for it. The rewards don't factor in here. The game needs to have players for rewards to matter, and it needs to have players for it to continue generating revenue, okay? There does come ceiling where if you don't keep getting new players in, you can't just keep dishing out rewards either. Now, there is a decent possibility that some of this changes when rewards are introduced. Maybe rewards are introduced and everyone jumps into the overworld to get rare Illuvials, buy them off the Illuvidex, and it has a thriving player base. I could be wrong about a lot of this, but this is how I feel on the topic. Now, acquiring these Illuvials on your own is simply too time consuming, mostly because leveling up Illuvials could take you 40 to 80 hours a week to really go through the grind and the slog, okay? And to even capture the rare Illuvials is hard enough on its own as well. Right now, the gap is simply too large between someone who loves Illuvium and wants to own a full collection and play the game a lot, and someone who's completely dedicated and wants to spend 10 hours hunting for one Alfie. You know what I mean? Like, the gap between those two players in the funnel of marketing, gameplay, and everything is way too large. It's way too hard for them to go from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel where you're looking at your Leviathan Gauntlet. Luckily for you, I have 3 solutions I propose. First thing is integrated scholarship systems would go a long way. We saw them work well for Axie Infinity and many other crypto games, and they're still going pretty strong in some of those games as well. Offloading the grind onto players that you can pay for their time will improve the situation greatly. I would love to get into super crazy competitive systems with Leviathan Gauntlet, but I need someone else to go and get the Illuvials for me. And so a paid scholarship system would be a really big improvement. Better rental systems also improves this general esports setup. We obviously have Polemos have just set up. We have Loot Rush as well. So that's already improving, but we need ways to rent people's time so they can go and level up your Illuvials, hunt in the overworld, and all that sort of stuff as well. The second solution I'm proposing is reducing the impact of stats and levels. Okay, reducing the stats impact to maybe 25% per stat would be way better. 20% would also be really, really good, where like your RAM fee and it getting a max stat and omega power isn't going to nuke an entire board of average Illuvials. You really need to avoid that, and reducing their impact is really good. The other thing is a level cap of say level 50 would be really cool, as it gets way too grindy after that. After level 50, it's just like, I completely switch off. I cannot be bothered. It is not for me. It is just no fun. That being said, even if you have a level cap for the Leviathan Gauntlet specifically, maybe in other future games or in things like co-op or PvE games, levels still matter. Your level 80 Ramfire is going to carry your 3 noob friends through a co-op game. Very much an MMO side of things. So there's definitely a use for level still, even if you cap it. I think this would be one of the things that goes a really long way. Obviously, with Illuvial overworld combat, leveling will be a lot more fun as well, but it won't be a perfect system. The third thing I'm suggesting is to change the encounter rules for good stats encounters in the wild. Now, as many of you might know, I love Pokemon, right? And in Pokemon, when you have a legendary Pokemon encounter, they actually come with 3 max stats by default. You can get 4 pretty often as well. Now, maybe in Illuvium, a stage 1 Illuvial has no max stats because they're the most common and abundant. A stage 2 Illuvial always comes with at least 1 max stat, and a stage 3 is always caught with 2 max stats. The beauty of this is it would encourage people to play and search for their own Illuvials. This is one thing that we're missing a little bit. So say you want to get a full team of pumped up Illuvials. You're just buying them off the Illuvidex, but you still want to encourage people to go into the overworld, explore, and find new ones. And having these sorts of systems would be like, okay, I can buy this Singe with like 3 max stats, but I know it's not too hard to get it if I really luck out and find it in Crimson Wastes. It's a whole different ballgame, and I think that would encourage people to go out more and explore, because I know finding that stage 3 will be a really big deal. It would also be cool. The other thing would be adding in really interesting items to improve the odds of good stats and enhance the progression system. So maybe a drone chip that's like, your stats when you encounter Illuvials are 10% better overall. Like they're just a little bit better. Or you have a guaranteed 10% on 3 of the stat in the stat wheel or something like that. That would be really, really cool and just incentivize people to keep progressing and playing through the game, which is something that we really need as we progress people through to the Leviathan Gauntlet. Now, I do actually have one last idea. Okay, I kept you in the dark about this one. I have one last idea that's, let's say it's more radical. Okay, you use the free and casual modes of Gauntlet as true onboarding into Leviathan. Free modes reward mostly fuel instead of ILV. Maybe the ranked Gauntlet leaderboards reward a little bit of ILV, but they mostly hand out fuel. You can use that fuel to go in the overworld, capture Illuvials, and things like that. Like, it's not too much fuel or anything like that, but it's a little bit to be like, I want to go start building my Leviathan Gauntlet team. I think that would be really exciting. And then when you have your Leviathan Gauntlet team, you go in and you earn a ton of ILV rewards, really creating that separation between the two. The other option with this is top performers in large tournaments, free and Leviathan tournaments, can earn special items that improve 1 stat to max for 1 Illuvial. I know people really don't like the idea of improving stats, stat rerolls, and all things like that, but having a really rare item you can only get through specialized events could be a really cool way to do that and help people get up Leviathan teams. The biggest problem that I see with Leviathan is it will have very few players in it. If you create ways to make it a little bit easier, but not discount too much those that are grinding for their best stats and things like that, I think it could go a long way. You could even split this item into 3 stages. So a stage 1 item you might get for coming 10th in a tournament can only max 1 stat for 1 stage 1 Illuvial, which would be pretty cool. And you have stage 2 and stage 3, and maybe some golden item for like the winner of the quarterly tournament that maxes the stats on 1 Illuvial. That could be really interesting as well. Very few of these are distributed. I think it would work really well. Now, nothing is wrong with the Leviathan being hardcore, but in its current form, it risks having next to no players and being almost unplayable for those who do love the game mode. This is such a shame since the Lizard League is coming, allowing fun and hardcore wagering in a competitive video game, which has been unheard of up until this point. and would reinstate the initial vision of the Leviathan. As long as we can come up with a solution to transition players from free to play into the overworld, into Leviathan, we can make the Leviathan as wacky and crazy and overpowered as we want to. Don't forget to subscribe. Use my referral code on the Illuvidex if you found this video helpful. And it may have expired, so please double check. And also check out this video where Paz coaches me to be good at Illuvium Gauntlet. I didn't think it was possible, but it was. If you are a noob, this will help you heaps.